Skager out to center. Lundvik shoots. He scores! Johnny Lundvik does it again!
Jarvis in close shot. There's a goal. Seth Jarvis, the 17-year-old, short side, glove side, high, just under the crossbar.
Cutting to the front of the net, and they score. Reese Newkirk along the right wing just took the pass. That was phenomenal patience from Seth Jarvis and the winner hawk.
Hey, this is Reese Newkirk, and you're listening to the Pucklandia podcast.
Welcome into Pucklandia. First off, let me apologize to the loyal listeners for not getting any shows out lately. It's been, I need to be better about that, as we come around to the 10th anniversary of this show, which, is pretty, a lot of shows don't make it that long, and we're gonna keep going. And, one of the reasons the show survived, through one of its slow periods was my guest, Josh Critzer, with PNW Hockey Talk. And pleased to have him on the show today with you.
Chad, it's good to be with you again. I always like to say I'm the house band that's available when needed to be called upon. So I always appreciate what it is that you do for the fans and these shows and Unfiltered. And you guys have had some pretty cool guests come through the show through Unfiltered. So I always love listening to your sister's show as well.
Yeah, I've been pretty fortunate. It's a guest powered show, and and without the listeners, there wouldn't be a reason to do it. And without the guests, I wouldn't have a platform. So it's sure I might have scored the goal, but you gave me the pass, and that's really what matters, right?
Yeah, and so and sometimes like the players will tell you the primary assist sometimes is better than the goal, right? So you just that's the joys of hockey, and it's why we do what we do, right? It's the reason why I write is because people want to read it. So if otherwise you're just kind of writing in or speaking into the abyss, right?
Yeah, well, and I want to touch on that before we even get into the X's and O's of things that over there at PNW Hockey Talk. You've always got a lot of content coming out, time permitting, and brought to you by you got a couple good sponsors over there. We should plug at the beginning of the show rather than the end.
Yeah, I'm always thankful. I got Jay Rallis and Sellers. He's here in Sherwood, and he's really supported me from really since I got started about 7 years ago, 7 years ago, and he kind of helps make all this possible. Helps cover some of the costs associated with running a website and some of the travels and things that I do. Obviously, didn't get as much writing done this year as I have in years past, and in both good ways and bad ways. Right, life has kind of changed a little bit since I started. I guess 6 years ago now. This will be the end of my 6th year, but very very thankful to him. He's kind of been one of the primary guys. I've got a few others who've kind of popped up along the way. So again, just thankful to them to. You're not doing this to make money. You're doing this to just try and not lose too much while you're doing it. So very thankful to him. Visit him at jrallisondsellers.com. They've got a tasting room in Sherwood, in Old Town Sherwood. And if you mention PNW Hockey Talk, they give you 2-for-1 tastings or even free tastings, depending upon how generous he's feeling and how nice you are to him. So always appreciative to people who get out there and have an opportunity to say hi to Jared.
And obviously, somewhat related. My friends down at Cartside, just north of the rink, you tell them you listen to Pucklandia, and they'll give you happy hour pricing on beers, which is nice. And they're continuing to expand. They've got a nice new area that they've rebranded it the Garden with like the old Rose Garden font, which is they've done a pretty good job of that. I mean, obviously they're working more of a Trailblazers crowd than us, but we still count, and we're going to be playing much farther into the season than Trailblazers are. So swing by there, tell them you listen to the show, and they'll take care of you. But
that's awesome.
Sometimes we forget that till the end, so I figured maybe we'll get it up front today. But
yeah, exactly.
We were talking off air a little bit. Just I mean, where do we want to go? We haven't done a show for a while, so what all there is to recap. But the two of us were in the building for the Climate Pledge game, and we talked about how we sat in very different parts of the arena. I mean, what was kind of your experience like sitting in the press box?
Yeah, it was definitely unique. I've covered hockey games from an NHL building before, but never for a Winterhawks game, and definitely not in as new of a building as Climate Pledge is. And it we got there a couple hours early. I rode up with Greg Sampson, who's works for the team as a director of U.S. scouting and works in hockey operations as well. So always fun to be able to kind of have somebody to ride up with and talk a lot of hockey and just kind of get a chance to experience a little bit the atmosphere of what it's like to cover a game from a reporter's standpoint. Kind of got to go in through the press gate there and got a chance to see the media room, and then we even just kind of got to walk around, kind of as I call it, the bowels of the arena, and just kind of got to see. It's kind of like being in the Moda Center a little bit, where you can kind of see where a lot of the storage stuff is, but you can also see kind of where the locker room areas are. And I saw a bunch of Buffalo Sabres bags sitting there, so I think they were getting ready to play the Kraken a couple days later or something like that. So right outside the Kraken's locker room, and but yeah, and then it's just the whole funness of trying to navigate to get from the very bottom of the arena to the upper level to be able to get to the press box and the press area. And it felt like I was looking straight down. It was like you said, we both probably had the most polar opposite views of the game, and I appreciated being up high like that. With my vision, it was a little hard to read the numbers at times, but they did give us like a little tablet in front of us, like a little screen that we could see to watch replays. But also that they had the two big jumbotrons that they've got there in Climate Pledge that was doing a good job of showing replays and showing the game action. So if I was kind of struggling to read the numbers, I could look on one of those two options as well. But you got it was a fun vantage point compared to where I sit in the VMC, which just is kind of right below the where the PA announcer is with Michael and all that. So that's a little bit that's a good angle. I like being up a little bit higher, but maybe not quite as high as I was in Seattle there. But you really get a chance to see the systems. You really get a chance to see the play develop. You get an opportunity to kind of just kind of almost watch the game in a completely different way. The way I try to describe it to people is if they've played any of the NHL video games and you use the overhead camera as opposed to the ice camera. And so for people who've played the games, you can maybe understand that. But if you haven't played the video games, it's just kind of like a straight down view, as opposed to what you had, where you can appreciate the speed and the tenacity and the fine details. For me, sometimes it was hard to tell, like, all right, is that shot, going 3 feet wide, or did it just miss the post by 3 inches? So it was a fun experience, fun opportunity to be able to talk to a couple of the guys afterwards. I know the players really enjoyed being in an NHL building. I know Tyson Jugnath, who's a Seattle Kraken pick, was, he was living the life and, getting ready, and how excited he was that, first of hopefully many games for him in that building. And he had an opportunity to see a couple of people from the Kraken while he was there. So just a lot of fun. I don't think the game went how Portland was hoping for. They kind of, they were thrown into a difficult schedule. They had played the Friday night at home, and then they traveled to Wenatchee right after the game on Friday against Tri-City, drove to Wenatchee, and they spent the night on the road on the way there, and then went from Wenatchee to Seattle that next day. And Seattle hadn't played all weekend, and so Portland was playing at the end of a 3-3 with 2 days of travel, and Seattle had they were fresh. So Portland, I think, did the best they could there, but ultimately that overtime loss, coupled with the overtime loss in Tri-City was enough to kind of take them out of the running for that number one spot in the Western Conference. But overall, just that, if you take out the hockey results of it, I think there was a lot of people that really enjoyed that weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate enough to make the full trip to see Wenatchee for the first time and take in that barn, and laser light show with AC/DC. I mean, it's junior hockey in these small towns. It's unique. It reminded me of the USHL, some Midwestern markets there. But yeah, and the result, the Climate Pledge result. I mean, that was it's we talk on the show sometimes about my love for the Kansas City Chiefs, which is again a 20-year journey, not a bandwagon thing, but and so it's sometimes you have it too good, right? And so as a fan of this Winterhawks team, I was really frustrated with that overtime loss, coupled with the overtime loss in Tri-City. That they needed more. They had a lot on the line, and I was kind of chapped about it. But you look at what the actual result of that is, that losing. So somebody else had first place, with an 18-game point streak to end the year. I mean, you know what I mean? Like it's a nice problem to have, to be able to be in the position to be frustrated that they lost out on first place on the the last weekend of the season. So I guess it's I mean, on the one hand you have a right to be frustrated. On the other hand, like, they're still in pretty good shape. They're really good hockey team with capped off a very strong regular season.
Yeah, and and a team like this that is performing so well, it's not a bad idea. And ideally, you never want to be losing games, but facing adversity and overcoming adversity is something that's the hallmark of a good team, and maybe even a great team. And I think especially if you compare the two Tri-City games, you win 11-1 one weekend, and then the next weekend you play, and you end up losing in overtime. And Kyle Kelsey looked like the Red Deer Kyle Kelsey when the Winterhawks played them on their central swing. And it shows how competitive this league is, and that you can't take any nights off. And even the teams at the top versus the teams at the bottom, if you start taking a team for granted, if you're not sharp, if you're not a couple of turnovers and the puck's in the back of your net. I think Portland really struggled with puck management on that Friday against Tri-City, and that it seemed like anytime Tri-City had a chance, they converted on it. And I don't know if that's Jan Spoonar not being 100% right, or what's going on there. I know he's played a lot of hockey down the stretch, and he missed a bunch of time too, but he basically played all three games, not this past weekend, but the weekend prior. And I know he got the third period off against Tri-City, but he basically played 8 of the 9 periods. And that's a lot of hockey for a goalie, and a lot of ups and downs, and it's just a lot of work. And then you throw in the travel with it too. But so yeah, but talking with some of the guys, and specifically Jack O'Brien, he and I we've had a lot of conversations over the past 2 weeks, and they were all frustrated, right? They wanted to win the West. That was a goal that they had. But it was also, we're going to lose a game in the playoffs. We're not going to go 16-0. I mean, I always hate the phrase, you can't win them all. I mean, technically you can. No one says you have to lose a game or two. You're probably not going to. It's not realistic to expect it. Doesn't mean you can't. It's just one of those phrases that kind of irks me a little bit. But one of the comments that Jack said to me this past week was, how do we respond after a loss? And I think we got a chance to see that in both situations. And we saw it earlier in the year when they lost to Kelowna at home. The next night they came out and put up double digits. This team, when they've had adversity, they've responded really well. And I think that's something to keep in mind of, yeah, it's a bummer, but it changed their opponent. It's going to change their second round opponent. But, in one sense, there's no easy matchups at this point, and you be careful what you ask for. But, because I think the difference between Spokane and Victoria is you just don't know, right? And, Spokane has certainly given them trouble with that top line. Victoria's got a pretty good top line as well. And so you don't know what you're going to have, but where that really might, without getting too far ahead of yourself, that where it might come into play is if you make it to the Western Conference Final and now you don't have home ice against Prince George. However, again, Portland is a type of team that they've seemed to do okay on the road. They've certainly had their bumps. The Central Swing wasn't super kind to them, but they play a brand of hockey that isn't necessarily as dictated on home ice versus the road. And with how deep this Winterhawks team is, especially up front and on the blue line, they have the ability to be a matchup nightmare. And, if you look at, and I think that's what separates the top of the Western Conference from those that just made it into the playoffs, is Portland and Prince George are not a one-line team or a one-pairing, defense. If a team wants to try and match up the Davies, Clausen, Stefan line, well, the next line that's going to come out is Danielson, O'Brien, and Newen. And then if you really want to start getting into it, now your third line, which has been perhaps one of their best lines going over the past week or so, is Chazowski, Buttazzoni, who was one goal shy of 30 goals in his 17-year-old season, and Zakreski, who's got points in 3 straight games. So that's a matchup nightmare for opposing teams. And Johnson is not afraid to have those matchups where a team like Spokane and Victoria are, when do you use Berthelot, Catton, and Roulette, right? When does James Patrick use Pasternak, Leventura, and Rushney, right? He's going to have to pick his spots at a little bit more than Portland will. So, yeah, it's a bummer to lose out on that, and it's frustrating given the opponents and where they were in the standings and all those things considered. But at the same time, they didn't miss the playoffs as a result of it. Who knows at this point? It's kind of a butterfly effect. But as long as they learn something from it, which I think this team has demonstrated that, I think they're probably going to be in an okay spot going forward.
Yeah, and you bring up a point I wanted to kind of dig down on too, as far as those two particular overtime losses, and that they did kind of get goalied in both those games. As far as Kelsey played really well, in that game, and I mean in the Climate Pledge game, I mean Ratzlaff was, that might have been one of the better goaltending performances I've seen in a long time, probably certainly in the last year or so, and really stood on his head and gave his guys a chance. And on the other end, we talk about, you mentioned, Spooner getting a lot of work as far as, games played, minutes played, but it's kind of the opposite end in a lot of work as far as a small amount of shots and long periods in between. And, we talk often, on shows like these about how, the goalies like to have a lot of work, and when they're getting shots infrequently and, and then a lot of times they're going to be, odd man rushes and things when they finally do, that sometimes that can be a really difficult way to play the game, and you kind of couple the two of those together, that it can cost you a point here and there, and when you're 1 point shy at the end of the year, I mean, it's kind of I guess if you would have, we talk about this all the time too, that if you would have won one of those games in October or whatever, like that 4-0 loss to Prince George when they had that bad weekend, the home game, I mean, that's kind of it right there. That would have changed the whole head-to-head, theoretical 4-point game and all that. And I was personally pretty frustrated with their effort that night, that weekend. So, say what you want about getting goalied in a fancy barn, like there was other opportunities over the course of the year.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, the points in October count just the same. Like, those wins in October don't only count for 1 versus 2, right? Like. And, look at the losses in Edmonton and Calgary. Those were some ugly losses, right? Like, those make a big difference, right? There's going to be those, but every team's going to kind of go through their slumps. It's part of hockey, and it's especially part of hockey with 16 to 20-year-old guys, right, who are figuring it out and who are balancing school and balancing relationships and living away from home. And there's a lot of things that these guys are asked to do, and then on top of that, to be, these top performing athletes every night. And, I'm not trying to make excuses for them, but it's that there are moments where, like, and that's why they talk about it's important to get off to a good start, because you're trying not to dig yourself out of a hole. I mean, Seattle is a prime example of that. Seattle is probably good enough to be a playoff team when they're healthy, but they were so banged up, and they had such a huge hole to dig out of from how they started the season and kind of the way their middle season went, that it was hard for them to recover. And Mike Johnson mentioned that when we talked to him after the last home game against Seattle. It was like, that's not a team that should be out of the playoffs. They've got some good young pieces. They got a couple of, top end guys, and, Hansel and Minio are certainly great. And, when Ratzlaff came in, Portland was off and running, and it looked like it was going to be points night, and they still got to 7. But, after Ratzlaff came in, they only scored twice. And that kind of changes the game a little, two or three times. I can't remember when exactly when it was, but it was regardless. Like Ratzlaff came in, and Portland was still kind of had the onslaught going, but they ran into that. But it's just it's part of the hockey. It's part of riding the highs and lows. And I bet you if you were to ask Wenatchee or Everett or some of those other teams, they would be more than willing to trade places and have missed out on the top spot by a couple of overtime losses or so. So, it'll all make for, if anything, it makes for a better story if and when they do win it. If they can overcome it, every team, look at the Chiefs, right? If we're going to use your example, the Chiefs won the Super Bowl this year and they didn't play a home game, right? That was always kind of the thing, like, well, can he win on the road? Well, he showed they can win on the road. Can Portland win by being the 2 seed? Well, let's find out.
Yeah, and we haven't touched on that it makes our path more difficult as far as the second round opponent, but I'm in negotiations to record with Vancouver color analyst Bill Wilms, and I suspect he's going to tell me that Vancouver has a pretty decent shot at upsetting the Silvertips. So I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I get the sense he has that feeling, and so who knows? We'll have to see what happens. So stay tuned to WHL Unfiltered for that episode when it comes to fruition. But another thing that has happened since we've spoken last is there's another pro deal been signed here. You want to get into that?
Yeah. So James Stefan earlier this week on last week now on Thursday is when it was announced that he had signed a free agent contract with the Edmonton Oilers. I know in talking with him and working on an article for him, he had a couple of teams that were pursuing him and showing interest in him, and through him talking with his dad and others that are kind of in his camp, it was as they kind of sorted through some of the offers, it was that the Oilers were kind of the right organization for him, and he'll likely start the AHL. I asked him, will we see you on McDavid's line here in a couple weeks? And when you're done here in Portland, and he obviously gave a laugh and a chuckle, and it wasn't a serious question, but it's one you just kind of have to playfully throw out there. But Stefan came in, and he I remember talking about him and O'Brien as their 16-year-olds, coming in as 5 years ago, and Stefan has had, quite the development. He even said in his interview that he wasn't pleased with how his 16-year-old year went. He wasn't proud of it. He didn't like how he showed up. He didn't like his habits. He didn't like how prepared he was. And he's worked really hard. And the fact that now that you have James Stefan, who's a 50-goal scorer, is out there on the penalty kill, like him and I both were kind of joking about it, like, would you have ever guessed you would have been a penalty killer? And he's like, no, never. But that's something he wanted to do. And we've seen guys like that have asked for those additional opportunities. And Mike Johnson is not afraid to give his top players those chances. And it's what helps round these guys into pro players and getting them ready to go play pro, because they're most likely gonna have to earn those top minutes again. And Stefan, over the past, especially the last 2 years, has kind of played those top minutes and has been relied upon to be a goal scorer. He's on power play 1, and he's kind of been a driving force. But when you move up to the pro ranks, there's a lot of guys ahead of you and other guys who've established themselves, and you're gonna have to kind of work your way and climb up the lineup. And but Stefan has worked his butt off, and he's gotten stronger in the gym. He's gotten stronger on the bike. He'll be the first to tell you that that stationary bike was not his friend when he came into this league. He's still probably not good friends with it, but he can keep up with it now, and he handles it really well. And it's really fun to see, as you and I talk about all the time, and you've ingrained this phrase into my head of, it's a developmental league for everybody. But in this case, for Stefan, as one of the actual players in the league, he has changed and grown so much. And even just how he conducts himself in interviews, how he talks with fans, how he interacts at the community events, how he's grown up off the ice as well, and just kind of grown into a young man. It's been really cool to see. And I think he's definitely earned that contract. He got to his 50 goals, he got to the 100 points. And he's done it 5-on-5 for the most part. I think only 9 of his 50 goals have come on the power play. And so he's doing it shorthanded. He's doing it 5-on-5 and not relying 100% on the power play, while also still being responsible defensively. And, we've even seen him out there in kind of the final minutes of games as well, which is, again, a testament to how he's worked on his defensive side of the game as well.
Well, you mentioned that they will give their star players opportunities on the PK. I mean, when they won the Western League Championship in 2013, that game winner was on a shorthanded goal.
Yeah.
And also set the record for all time playoff goals by one player in Ty Ratty. And so that just shows you that if the best guys on the team, offensively, will want to pick that role up, and there's opportunities there, and that and also then what kind of in a leadership role, as in this case, we're talking about an overage. I mean, how does that trickle down? That as far as that being valuable for setting an example in the room for the rest of the guys.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the fine line that Mike Johnson and I have been talking about all year is how do you balance doing that with also not taxing your top players all the time. And I think, admittedly, Mike Johnson said last year at the end of the playoffs, he's like, our top guys are just kind of exhausted. We had relied on them so much down the stretch. We hadn't really developed that next wave of penalty killers that could come in and take some of those minutes. You look at the addition of Tyson Jugnoth and what an addition he's been, but he wasn't playing penalty kill, and he kind of got thrown in there. That took some minutes off of Cagnoni of him having to do that all the time too. And and you look at even guys like Zakreski and Newen who've really kind of improved their game on the penalty kill, and then you add Danielson into the mix too. But Danielson's, speaking of a top player, my goodness, what an addition he's been. Absolutely as advertised, if not better than advertised. But staying with Stefan, it's something that he was looking for. It was something that he asked for. It was something that he wanted to be coached on, and he really committed to it. And you've seen guys who've done that, and you look at over the past couple of years, the guys who have not had a pro contract, but in their overage season or in their 19-year-old year earned that contract under Mike Johnson. Look at Taylor Gauthier, right? Like he was an amazing goalie in Prince George, but he took his game to a completely different level once he got here to Portland. And, he earns his contract. Josh Davies, and, I'd love to get into him and what he did this year, just on how remarkable that is. But, he was nowhere close. He'll tell you when at Neely Cup, he was like, I want to earn a contract, but I got a ways to go. And he signs his pro deal halfway through the year. Like, talk about a development, talk about a guy who bought into the system. And, it's just kind of the way, there's a couple other guys that I'm missing here, that have signed their pro deals, but, getting guys like Nick Cicek to the point where he's ready to play pro games, right? Like, I think I think there's a lot of people, Nick himself would probably tell you that he didn't think he was going to be signing a pro deal and being in the NHL and, kind of up and down between the AHL. But just the way that these players are able to get pro ready, so that way they can, when they leave Portland, they're ready to make a difference. And Stefan is just the latest example of a guy like that. We've talked how many times on this show about John Ludwig, right? Playing junior B to he's now, he's got several points and he's playing for the Penguins now on a regular shift and getting a pro deal, right? Like, granted he got drafted by Florida and has moved around a little bit, but just the way that these guys go, and Tyson Kozak, and the list just goes on and on of guys that when they're ready to go, they go and play pro, and they're ready when they leave, the Rose City here.
Yeah, a guy like Ludwig, he's fighting dudes like whatever it takes, to
Yep.
stand out and get noticed. And yeah, you mentioned, a guy like Chichik. I mean, he almost didn't survive. I mean, his junior career here in town. I mean, about halfway through, he was about going to fall out of the league, and then turn it around into a pro deal. So it's you take the. I mean, if you're going to get opportunities, and continue to get opportunities, you gotta make the most of them. And you've listed off a definitely list of guys that have done so.
Yeah, and there's more to come, and there's the next wave that are looking to do so. Tyson Jugnath is looking to add his name. Clausen and O'Brien. They're going to have some opportunities here, and I know in speaking with one of the scouts who was in the building, on Saturday, I want to see how these guys do in the playoffs. I want to see how they do in when it's clutch time. Can they put the team on their back? How do they lead during this time? And so, that next wave of guys, Jacob Buttazzoni and Josh Zakreski are draft eligible. Jan Spooner is looking to try and get drafted. And then you got the next crop of Miller and McDonough who are kind of watching this veteran leadership group of guys. And Canyoni's trying to get his contract too, and so you've got all these kind of guys that are. It's the fun. It's what makes junior hockey fun. Is you got everybody kind of at different levels, and then once kind of you reach the pinnacle here, like Stefan, when he's done, when for his sake and for a lot of the fans listening to this show as of Winterhawks fans are probably going to be when he's done, hopefully in a couple months. He's going to go right back to having to earn every minute of ice time again, and might be in and out of the lineup for a little while. So it's building those habits. It's learning how to be respectful as a 20-year-old and making the 16s and the 17s feel welcome. So it's a really cool way to just kind of see how this organization is run, and how every spot's going to have its warts, and it's going to have its areas that can do better. But when players leave Portland, they're ready to move on to that next level.
Well, and you personally, Josh, you're kind of in those fields. We talked about a little bit that you've been covering this league for an exact generation of guys now. That the overagers this year, you remember breaking in as a 16. So kind of that's once you're there for the full cycle. I mean, it's kind of a time to maybe reflect a little bit about how the league works and all that type of thing.
Yeah, and when I started, my first year, Clausen, Stefan, and O'Brien were prospects, right? They were in there. They had just been drafted, and so now for them to because kind of my rookie year, if you will, was when Januzzi and From Delorme were 16s, and I remember writing prospect articles and talking to. I found on my old audio of the first time I ever spoke with Stefan, O'Brien, and Clausen, and when they were here on visits, and so you do get to see the full cycle, and it's kind of bittersweet, right? Because it was tough last year, saying because in the position that I'm in, I'm down in the locker room area. I'm at practice, I try and go once or twice a month, and I'm on the road sometimes, and so I see these guys a fair amount, and when I was writing my article for PNW Hockey Talk on the overagers, I'm like, this one hits hard. Like, it was hard last year writing about Fromm and Dante, because I'm like, these are the rookies that I broke in with, and now these guys, it's like, well, these are the guys who were drafted the first time, and I remember talking to them when they were 15 years old, and now just where they are now, and the men that they've turned into, and I know fans love that aspect of it as well, and it's a really fun experience of I still have the quotes from Jarvis saying that he's a shy guy and that he doesn't like to talk. I mean, would anybody, if I posted that audio, would anybody believe me? Like, we've seen some of the interviews Jarvie has, right? Like, it's fun to watch these guys grow up. They come in as kids and they leave as men. I absolutely love that about junior hockey.
Yeah, and obviously but it never stops, and we talked about, Budazzoni already. I mean, he's going to be, the shouldering the load of goal scoring for this team next year, and appears to be, poised to make that jump, hopefully. But, that's neither here nor there. We'll have plenty of time to talk about next year when next year comes, and and right now they don't need his goal scoring, but it certainly is nice to have. And back to the task at hand, which is the Victoria Royals come Friday night.
Yeah, and Diego is also scoring now, right? Like, he's got goals in 3 straight games. He's got 3 assists in that time frame. He's got 29 goals, playing mostly third line. He's shown that in a pinch he can move up if Mike Johnson wants to adjust his lines. He could go up and he can play on that top line with Clausen and Stefan, and if they need to move guys around. And but yeah, he's absolutely going to be the guy. But he's also in a way, I think you asked me this last year when we were doing our one of the previews of kind of who's your X factor, and I hope I'm not jumping the gun a little bit, but spoiler alert, for me it's Diego Budazzoni, like, at least up front, because he's going to be the guy who is going to get some of those really good matchups. That whole third line of Zakreski and Chizowski, and that's a line that can really bring the energy for Portland, and they win puck battles, they turn momentum around, and I think they're going to be a really key in the series against Victoria when the Royals come to town here on Friday. But as you kind of start to look at that series, Portland did win all 4 games against the Royals this year. However, 2 of those were, beyond 60 minutes. One they won in overtime, and the other they won in a shootout. And, so the Royals make them work. The Royals, when their game is going well, they're structured. They're not going to take a ton of risks. I think look for Victoria to try and play as much as they can between the whistles. They're going to not necessarily be as defensive as we saw Tri-City on Friday night, where they kind of got the puck, they chipped it out, and they changed. They got to the red line, and they dumped it in, and they changed and set up their structure. They're going to be a little bit more go forward than that, than what Tri-City was able to do. But and they've got some high end guys there, but they've also, when they lose, it's when they get out of that structure. And when they get out of that structure, they have a tendency to sometimes give up goals in a hurry. And we've seen Portland, especially at the VMC, when they get one, and Matt Odette says this, Seattle's head coach says this all the time, when Portland gets 1, they get 2, and when they get 2, they get 3. And obviously I didn't talk to him after the game, but I also apparently need to extend that quote to 3, they get 4, and when they get 4, they get 5. Now, apparently, at least that's what they did on Saturday. But it's, Victoria is gonna present them a challenge. Braden Holt has seen plenty of the Winterhawks between his time in Everett and with the Royals. I don't think he's going to be at the level of Kyle Kelsey or Scott Ratzlaff, but when he's dialed in, he's a good goalie. Victoria's, I think the biggest question for them is that they're kind of the opposite. They're coming in. They've in their last 10 games they're 2-7-1, and a big part of that is because of how banged up they are. They've got 4 guys who are what we'll have to see whether Reggie Newman plays on Friday, but they've unless there's obviously we're not going to get the weekly reports anymore, but Bjornsson, Spizaka, and Sapusek are all out week to week or month to month, and those are 3 guys that would be playing big minutes for them. And there was a couple times earlier in the year where I think they had 4 of their starting 6 defensemen were out of the lineup, and I think they were dressing 3 affiliate players on defense at one point. So they've kind of had a tough go of it lately down the stretch. They've had a little bit of a tough schedule as well there, but the thing is about playoffs, everybody's back to 0-0, and it doesn't matter. And they've got the ability. They've got a couple really high end guys or higher end guys. I think the player to watch, outside of Dawson Pasternak is Cole Rushne. He reminds me a little bit of a couple years ago when Portland played Prince George in the first round with Riley Height. Riley Height was kind of the driver of that team, but he was 16. And there's only so much a 16-year-old can do. Height did everything he could at that point. Rushne's kind of been, I think, everything. He's a superstar in this league already at 16, and he's only going to get better. But and this will be a good learning experience for him. But between, after Rushney, Tyson LaVenture, who came over in a trade earlier in the year, I think he came over from Swift Current, if I've got it right. But he's come over and he's fit in really well with the Royals. But once you kind of get past, Pasternak, LaVenture, and Rushney, it kind of drops off a little bit. So it'll be key for the Royals to how their depth matches up. But I think that's where Portland is most likely, I should say, to take advantage of Victoria's is in the depth department.
Yeah, Victoria's been a kind of wild ride this year. You mentioned, finishing, kind of banged up and not getting results, and they kind of started the year that way too. But kind of surprise, moving on from their coach and bringing in James Patrick, and then they were kind of house on fire for a while, and were I don't remember what the record was under him, but it was like, I want to say they went from 500 to 750, during that span, or not for the whole season, but for that stretch.
Yeah. Yep.
And then kind of came back down to earth. So did the clock strike midnight, or or was it more injuries and tough opponents? I mean, I guess we'll find out. But we on WHL Unfiltered, we had Cleve Deanshaw, who writes for the paper there, the Times Colonist, on about 2 months ago, and so I don't know if that's how relevant that is now, but that's available. I'll make sure to repost that. But and you mentioned Pasternak, and obviously a player that Portland fans know well, and a guy that's really thrived on the island. I mean, he scored more goals this year than he had his entire Western League career combined to this point, and so he's kind of been the straw that stirs the drink for them, and I think a lot of fans are happy to see it, but local fans. But I don't know if they'd like him to continue scoring though.
Yeah, I think they were happy for him when he scored the first time against Portland, and then after that they're like, okay, we get it, right? Like, enough, you can move on, right? But he's going to be, he's going to be playing with a chip on his shoulder. It's his overage season as well, and he's probably trying to earn a contract of some sort as well, and see if he can maybe get an AHL deal. With some of his performances, or as he looks to kind of his future, and see if he can land a good spot in at a good U Sports there. So, but yeah, he's absolutely going to be a player to watch, and he's an exciting player. His vision and his hockey IQ is remarkable, and you pair him with LaVenture and Rushney, and that's a dangerous line that Portland cannot fall asleep on. And throughout the year, there's been times where what burns Portland is that other team's top line, and I mentioned it a couple times earlier, but it seems like especially in the Spokane series, it was the season series, that is, anytime that Spokane was doing damage, it was their top line, and in the series so far, with Portland, it's been Pasternak, LaVenture, and Rushney. Pasternak has a goal and 6 assists, LaVenture 3 goals, 3 assists, and Rushney 3 goals and 2 assists. Right? Like, they're performing, and they have performed in these games. So, how does Portland shut them down? What approach do they take? Do they try and are they looking for a certain matchup? Are they going to try and use Ulsher? I know that Mike Johnson really trusts Ulsher in kind of that shutdown role. What does he do with his defensive pairings? We've seen when they're down a goal and they really need some offense, he's not afraid to put Cagnoni and Jugnath out together. If they're trying to play a shutdown role, are we going to see Ryder Thompson and Marek Ulsher together? Or does he keep those two split up? What does he do? How does he utilize Josh Morey, who's just as steady as they come back there along with Ryder? So I think that's going to be a key focus. I imagine as they work on their pre-scout, I believe the team is off today as we're recording this on Monday, if I have their schedule right. And it was kind of a day for the coaches to get working on the pre-scout and figuring out kind of what their plan of attack is going to be. And we'll have to see how that goes. But the other key piece of playoffs is, you ride the highs and the lows of that, and you have to be able to put, if you win game one, you can't think it's just going to be a cakewalk in game two, or if you lose game one, all right, it doesn't mean the series is over, right? And for either team. And one of the big things of playoffs is the adjustments, and the adjustments get amplified from between periods to now how do the teams respond between games. And that was one thing we've really seen, especially in that Seattle series, a couple years ago when Portland lost in 7 to them, was the changes and the adjustments that Matt Odette made and how impactful those were for Seattle. And, how does James Patrick and how do Mike Johnson and their assistants, how do they kind of adapt as that's going along? How fast before they, mix up the line combinations? How fast before they, tweak what the forecheck looks like? What do they do on their power plays? What's working? What's not? I think Portland is probably looking back at their power plays in this, because they'll look back at kind of when they scout the opponent, and they'll see that Victoria killed off 12 of the 13 power plays that Portland had in the 4 games this year. So how does Portland adapt to Victoria's, kind of higher pressure style of killing a penalty? How do they adapt? All right, well, they scored 3 power play goals in game 1. How do they keep that going into game 2 or whatever it might be? And same thing for Victoria. They know that Portland is going to try and score off the rush. So what do they do to try and change that? What do they do to try and slow the Winterhawks down through the neutral zone? And how do they make adjustments, good and bad, throughout the series? Because there are going to be highs and lows, and there's going to be adversity for both teams. It's just what's going to happen. It's the nature of playoffs, and it's part of what makes a 7-game series a lot of fun.
You remind me of something that I hadn't thought about this at all before. But typically, Mike Johnson has the experience advantage, and I think this might be the first time since Kootenay and Chris Knobloch in 2011 that at least recent experience. I mean, you could look at it, a career or whatever, but since we started having playoffs again the last couple of years, that James Patrick has been to the finals a couple times, I believe.
Yeah. And last year too.
Yeah,
right? Like with Winnipeg.
Yeah, recently, very recently, and so, Winterhawks just haven't had that kind of playoff success really since Mike went to Pittsburgh, essentially. And even with some good teams. And so, this, at least, say what you will about, does experience matter? And again, Mike has been there to the, in the past and over career has, quite a bit. But as far as recently, like, it's one of the very rare occurrences that the nod would go to the other coach in this case. And that's something I hadn't really thought about, even though, he's only, James Patrick hasn't even been on the island for very long, but he's been at the highest level in this league very recently. So it's kind of just an interesting thought. I hadn't really thought about that coaching matchup till just now. Yeah,
and believe me, the coaches know that they're matching up against each other too, and they take it just as competitively as the players do. They want to win. They want to put their players in the right position. And James, like you said, James Patrick has been there recently. He's done it with a team. I think that Winnipeg team had a little bit more, few more horses than especially up front, and than this Victoria team does. But he knows what it takes to win, and he knows what the grind is. He knows about riding those highs and lows, and how to get the most out of his players, and getting them to buy into the style of play that he wants. And at times during the regular season, it's been very effective. And if they can stay healthy and get healthier, they're by no means this is just going to be a 4-game sweep guaranteed. Like it's not that. This is it's going to be a tough series for Portland, and it's a 2-3-2 format. I think that's another thing to kind of consider too for the Winterhawks, and Mike Johnson mentioned it on Saturday of the importance of starting out strong at home, because if you split at home, you now have to go win at least one game on the road there before you're back home. And home ice means something, and so there's a lot going into it, and it's gonna be fun, and it's why we play the games. It's why we're excited as fans, and and as media members, it's an opportunity to kind of see, all right, everything that they've learned, all the adversity, all the ups and downs, all the highs and lows, all the runs and the hits and the goals and the comebacks and the shorthanded goals that Newen scores, when they've got the goalie pulled and force overtime, like all those fun moments that you have, all those kind of just lead up to these next couple of weeks and hopefully months if you're a Portland fan, right? You really want this to be, it's what creates those memories, right? The fact that you can, you remember what that deciding goal was, with, you said Patan, right? Ratty.
Tyretti, yeah.
Yeah, right? Like, you're not going to remember for the most part. I mean, now you've got a really good hockey memory, but I mean, if you tell me what happened in game 32 of the regular season 10 years ago, you probably can't tell me what happened. But you can tell me what happened in these playoff games, right? This is when memories are made. This is when legends are born, really. And what helps these players' names really kind of, really rise up the charts. We're seeing things that, Stefan's doing that hasn't been done by an American player in 20 years. And Canyone's put up more points from a WHL defenseman in 30 years than anybody else. And think of some of the names that have come through as WHL defensemen. Ty Smith, Pouliot, right? Zellweger, Owen Byram, right? I'm missing countless good names, right? He's put up more numbers than any of those guys have. And the fact that all that is great, and that's awesome. But I imagine these players would trade all of it for a championship. And that process and all of that experience and all that goes into it is all starting on Friday.
Yeah, we haven't mentioned Nguyen and his shorthanded goal record he just set.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
All right. Well, I know, and that was a good segue to wrap it up. I know you have other things to do, and I've kept you for some time. But anything else on the way out the door?
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to say is just I want to give a shout out to Josh Davies, and I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about that player, and I think the way that he's changed his game from what he was doing in Swift Current to what he did this season with Portland is nothing shy of remarkable. From the first time I saw him take the first shift of the ice at Neely Cup, and the back check that he had, and getting in the, not in the face, but being vocal of, guys, we compete hard. It was like, dude, it's day one of Neely Cup in August, right? Like, he came in ready to work, ready that he had something to prove. And a lot of the question was, can he dial it back? He led the league in penalty minutes. This year he had 40 less penalty minutes than he did. And he had no suspensions, right? I think there was even internally, they were probably prepared for him to get suspended once or twice like he did as an 18-year-old. Josh Davies didn't get suspended, right? He almost doubled his point production. He had 36 goals this year, right? Like, he found that line. He wasn't afraid to step up. He wasn't afraid to continue to hit, but he's picked his spots. He's recognized it. He's also gotten to showcase the skill that he has, and he turned it into a pro contract with the Florida Panthers. And so, I think, and this is also really when if I look back at the quotes I have from Mike Johnson, was Josh Davies is really going to help us in the playoffs. So as exciting as he's been on the ice for Portland, and I know there's a lot of fans who have number 71 as one of their favorite players, I think what he brings to the game and his style of play is only going to get amplified here as the playoffs come around. So it's important for him that he continues doing what he's done over the course of the 55 games that he played this season. I think if he doesn't have that injury. He's easily a 40 goal scorer. But alas, he finishes with 36. But so he's going to be a real driving force for Portland, and his physical style of play and the way that he can cause turnovers and how he back checks and breaks up plays coming the other way. Those things just get amplified even more in playoffs. And between him and Danielson and Jugnoth, the moves that Mike Johnson has made this year to bring in not only kind of other guys that kind of help fill in the spots, but some of these higher end, top 6 players, top 4 defensemen, has really set this team up really well. And I'm excited to see how Davies handles being in the playoffs and the opportunity, because he hasn't been in playoffs before, right? Like him, and it's something he's wanted. He's really wanted to be able to showcase what he can do. And him, along with all of his teammates and all the Royals, they're going to have an opportunity to really kind of put a stamp on this season. And so I'm really excited to see him and see what he's able to do in the playoffs.
Well, I mean, fans have always liked that kind of player, that, somebody that scores goals but's also mean. A Cam Neely, a Keith Tkachuk, a Brad Ross kind of a guy that, if you can fill the net and also, be a pest, like, I mean, what more do you want? You're pissing them off every possible way at that point. You know what I mean?
Yep. And one fun little nugget that I'll have for in one of the articles I'm trying to get out beforehand. But if for fans who get to the games early, I haven't been able to see if he's done it recently. But towards the end of the season, Josh Davies and Tyson Yaremko have started warming up during warmups right at the red line, and they kind of face the other team. And I asked Josh about that, and I was like, what are you doing? He's like, well, it's kind of sizing them up. It's a little bit of intimidation. And I was like, really? Okay, so tell me more about that. And so the nickname that they've given themselves are the Patrollers. So him and Yaremko are. So if you get to the game early on either Friday or Saturday, take a look and see if Davies and Yaremko are hanging out at the center red line, chatting up any of the players, or trying to get under their skin or anything like that. It's just it was something Davies said he was pretty excited to do, and it's kind of a fun little nugget. So we've got them calling themselves the Patrollers out there.
Kind of reminds me of the New West Bruins in the '80s, going down and taking your net away or whatever.
Yep.
Or the Swiss goalie in World Juniors, that won't leave the ice before the Canadian goalie does or whatever, and they have that kind of standoff. Like,
yep, it's just the little things and anything he can do to try and get an edge. And he's like, even if I take their focus away for 30 seconds, that's 30 seconds that they weren't focusing in. So kind of a fun little piece from him, and it'll be really exciting to see just to have playoff hockey again. And I don't take it for granted after kind of missing it for 2 years, a couple years ago. So get out there, support the teams, support junior hockey, buy the local papers where you can. And I'm hopeful that Victoria gets a good turnout in their barn as well. It's always fun when it's a full rink regardless. It just makes for better hockey. These players have worked so hard and they deserve it. So hopefully both rinks have some good attendance, and it's just fun hockey back and forth both directions.
Yeah, I love it. It's a game. It's silly, but but it's fun. It's escape from reality for 3 hours at a time, and I like that part too. So
absolutely.
All right, Joshua, we appreciate your time.
Yep, absolutely, Chad. Looking forward to seeing you around the rink.